don't know about
So
that.
this is Faith Over Breakfast with Eric from Village and Andy from Mission in Tucson, Arizona, in the Village studio. And we just talked about missionaries and white privilege and
White savior complex.
complex.
And we got off on, what did we get off on exactly?
Reparations.
Yeah, but we went another direction. Anyway,
How Christianity is behind every single good movement ever in all life and entirety.
Yeah, you want to hear Eric and Andy have a disagreement. and hey, it could be way worse. I love talking to you, man.
Yeah, so here's what I
poke the bear.
Do want to say is that the views heard on this podcast do not represent the Village, and at some level don't fully even represent us. And
it's a working out. Yeah.
And so you're hearing us think out loud. So if you say Eric thinks this, and because I heard it on the podcast, that is not true.
We're in process.
We're in process, and some of it, yes, I do believe, and some of it, I'm just trying to hear myself talk out loud and be pushed back on
and
by
figure
Andy.
And figure it out. And
vice versa.
Same goes for me. Yep.
So
thanks for tuning in to any of this, and we hope that it spurs on conversation for you. Feel free to email us, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. Talk to us on Facebook or Instagram, where we're super active, as in not, but we'll answer you because we do get those notifications.
Yes.
And
Andy
feel free
loves
to
answering you.
Do I?
Yeah,
I try.
He tries hard.
I do. I mean,
yeah,
why not?
That's great.
Eric, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a happy Tuesday. We've had all kinds of technical difficulties in the new Village studio. So Andy's computer is now here, and it's effectively...
That's a good computer. It does what it needs to do.
It does what it needs to do. Things get done. And thanks for the coffee.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. That's one nice thing about being here is, I have a coffee maker in the other studio too, but you have to actually put grounds in it. And
right.
You've got the cheater Keurig.
I have the cheater Keurig.
Which in this moment is perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So I have coffee. We're both here. It's always nice to have a nice conversation after being razzled by technical difficulties.
Yes.
Technical difficulties. So, but hey, here we are. So
I think we're gonna do like a triple episode, actually.
Triple. We were just saying double. It's grown by one.
Part 1 and part 2, and then we have an episode that didn't go up. So we're gonna be releasing different episodes a little closer together.
You're gonna think we're recording them close, but we're not.
Right.
Yeah, you should just release that other episode today.
Yeah.
If your technical difficulties
I released
stop.
the gun one yesterday.
Okay.
And I thought, when we did it, I thought, wow, this is not a great episode. But then I listened to it and I was like, wow, that was really good. So people, you should go back and
listen to the gun
episode. I think it's really thought-provoking. It made me think, and I was like, huh. Wow,
okay.
We talked about that? That's interesting.
Isn't it interesting that I forget, I don't remember what we talked about. So it's a good thing we have, even if we're the only ones that listen to this podcast, at least we can remember what we were thinking 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's almost like just a weekly journal between you and I. It's a journal. You kind of get to look into our journal if you really care.
Thanks for reading our journal.
Yeah.
But stay out of my other journal.
Yeah.
You said something like that the other day. Nobody gets to read your personal journal.
Nobody gets to read my personal journal.
Man, I don't really have a journal anymore. That'd be a cool thing to have. Anyway.
Well, you started a blog.
Yeah.
What's the blog address? www.awesomeandy?
It's medium.com, and you look up my name, Andy Littleton.
Medium?
Medium.
Like a medium person or medium?
No, we're not a spiritual medium, Eric.
No, like you're medium-sized.
Medium-sized. Only medium-sized people are allowed on there. Sorry, Rod. It's just us medium-sized people.
The blog for medium.
Rod's our friend, Eric's co-pastor, for those who don't know, and he is not medium. Rod's a big man. He used to dunk the basketball behind his head.
Behind his head.
So, medium.com, look at my name. But what I'm doing with this is I'm simply trying to exercise the writing muscle. Like I did this book, and I think I learned a lot about the writing process. The new manuscript of the fixed manuscript is now up. So if you want one that doesn't annoy you when you read it, it's now It's
Awesome.
much better.
So now I can buy my copy.
Now you can buy your copy. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
Looking forward to that.
And the
I'm
little
waiting for
detail on the
audio.
spine is fixed. Oh, the audio. Well, you're going to have to read the audio version.
I'll do that. I'll make an audio version for you.
That'd be actually pretty cool. Maybe Rod would do it.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, just kick me out of the job. I volunteer for it.
Oh, sure.
And then you just have Rod do it.
Well,
Okay,
he's
that's
got
how
the
this
voice.
works.
He's got the voice.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
But
I like my voice.
But so it doesn't. If there's any theme around it, it's probably going to be more stories about people.
Okay.
And so the first one that it was just a little thing I doodled that I just wanted to see if I could figure out how to work the blog, honestly. So it was, I thought this is okay. Like, and if it's the first one and not very many people see it, but it was just about how my chiropractor closed and what I'm going to miss about his office. So if you're thinking, wow, I was wondering about Abby's back and his chiropractor, then that blog is there for you. And then the second one that I put out, now that I've kind of figured it out, was about my night in a music video.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
maybe if I have time, I'll put some links to that. Is that up yet? The actual video?
No, not the music. The music video is not out yet, but my little blog about it.
Yes, we'll put a link to your blog on this show notes for this week.
Great, do it. All right. And it's and you can follow the blog. It's linked to Goodreads. And I stick them on Facebook too. So there you go.
Oh, you're so hip to the groove. All right, well,
am I?
Let's do this simple. Because we were started late and
we got things to do. So in the news, NPR and then probably everywhere else, was this lady who was doing missions work in Uganda, and I texted you about this. So I want to do another part on this because we've got a friend at Mission who did missions work in Africa, has done short-term, lived there for a part of his life, and then came back to the States and became an MD. And he's now the sports medicine, in one of the MDs in sports medicine at the U of A. So I'm really interested. I think he's willing to record some thoughts on this tomorrow. And so look out for like a part 2, maybe more of the medical, ethical, missions perspective on that.
Right.
But you brought up to me white privilege, and I thought, well, that's interesting because the idea of a white savior complex was brought up by at least the NPR folks in reference to this lady. And I thought, why don't we, here we are, 2 white men, and I'm sure we're going to do this imperfectly, and we should state the premise of this show. No, we haven't planned this. This is, you're joining us for breakfast. We're trying to talk this through.
Yeah.
So let's talk about white savior complex and the white privilege that I think leads to things like that and other things that we see and experience. And unpack that part, and then we'll jump in with a follow-up episode on more of the missions, ethical, medical piece to that, our reflections on that story. So, but what was on your mind now? You didn't read, you heard about this. You did hear about this.
Yeah, I did. In fact,
how'd you hear about it?
I may have, I think NPR, not actually, I did what I'm not supposed to do. My phone was not on the carpet. I think the BBC might have done something on this.
I believe it. I think most of the major news
Sue and
outlets.
I rarely watch the news, but we actually caught this particular story. So that's how I heard about this story. But the whole white privilege thing is just something I've been thinking about, and I always think about.
Really?
Because I think as a white male who's pretty big, like I have a little bit of privilege just in that. I have a lot of privilege in that. When I walk into a room, what I want, I'm articulate enough and big enough to get what I want and have people react to me in a different way. And so
and you're aware of that. And
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then as a pastor who stands in front of people, that gives me an element of power in people's lives. So I'm white. I have a position of power. I get to be microphoned to tell people what I think about Scripture, expect them to listen to me. So
you and I have discussed this element of it
yes.
in the past.
Yeah.
And one of my questions, I'll just put it out there so maybe we don't forget, is do you recognize that and then not try your best to not use it, or do you recognize that and then decide what to do with what you have?
Well, and here's the thing I wrestle with is I think humility is actually having power and not using it.
Yeah.
So
now, what about using it for those who need it?
Yeah, and that's a good
who don't have it, like using it on someone's behalf.
Right, and I think there's like a more a micro and a macro kind of
for sure
conversation about it.
And then who decides when you use it? Do you get to decide, you with the power
get to use it
when you use it, but then again, when somebody is powerless and doesn't realize they could ask you to speak for them, is there a time when you should, even though nobody's asked?
Right.
That's where it gets
it does
sticky to me.
I think
I don't know.
Probably not realizing the everyday struggle of somebody who's not white and who's not a male.
So So there's now in this mission story, we've got a white female.
Sure.
And then our experience is living as white men.
Yes.
And it, in a way, like a better way to do this would be probably to have somebody with a very different experience in this room talking.
That would be if we had a show where
we had a show and we were an interview show. And so I just want to I want to put that on the table and recognize that.
Yeah, we're not an interview show. It's what you and I would be talking about over coffee.
Yes.
And
so
as friends.
Yeah. I want to just make sure everybody gets that.
And I suspect both in this podcast channel and others that we do in the future, we'll have those spaces that we can do that. But I think some of it is I just first don't think about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first thing.
The fact that you don't have to think about it.
Yes, that's number one. And number two, I think I'm not in the habit of listening to and validating other people's experience of society.
Yeah.
And I think those are two practices that are difficult, time-consuming, and frustrating.
Yeah.
But I think for me personally, in college, that for a while I was a women in third world countries. That was my major, or kind of my focus.
Yeah.
And in cross-cultural social psychology. So I talked a lot about this. I learned a lot about it. I read a lot. Then left college, and I feel like in the last few years I've returned to that I mean, just as Trump has become president, and I'm not even attributing any of the tension to him, though I think he's part of it all, whatever that means. He's a factor in it. Race has become more and more conversation from the shootings that we experienced to just the injustice that's begun to be talked about in a more often.
Yep.
And just the statistics are becoming more and more overwhelming as to how the system treats us based on our race and our income and our education.
Yeah, I think the helpful things for me to hear, and I saw some. So I had this was a little bit fortunate when I lived in South Chicago. I lived in the neighborhood of, not just there's a neighborhood called South Chicago, and then I worked in a neighborhood called Roseland. So I wasn't there long. I mean, I was there half a year, maybe a little over half a year. But I was nervous when I moved there about because we would hear gunshots all the time, and there were guys selling drugs on the corner and stuff like that. And I lived with an interracial couple who were they're actually the first interracial couple at Moody Bible College. They broke the rules to be a couple, and then the husband became the first black professor at Moody. So a pretty unique experience, and I didn't know that's who I was moving in with. My school just gave me somebody to call who might have a room, and I got to live with them. But I would kind of share. I'd say, hey, what should I do? Like out on the street, how should I behave? And the lady, who was the white lady, she said, well, you're not going to have a problem. Here's why. Everybody's going to assume you're a cop. You're white. There's no other reason for you to be walking around here. Even with your little backpack on, you're up to something. There's some other reason you're here. Nobody's going to want to deal with that. So they're not going to bother you. And she said, and second, the police who are walking around, they're not worried about you, because you're white. And so you're going to be just fine. You're not going to have any issues unless it's a stray bullet. And then guess what? There's nothing we could do. I said, oh,
Wow.
okay. So I, my first couple weeks, and I got to where by, the end of the time, I knew the lay of the land, and I was very comfortable walking around and waving at neighbors, and it was great. But at first I was very nervous. And I remember pretty vividly one day I was walking down the street. Back then I used to wear baggy jeans. I had a backpack on, I had a ball cap on, and I had a big Mark Echo, which is kind of a, typically more of a streetwear brand of the day. This Mark Echo coat, big baggy, jeans, Mark Echo, backpack, ball cap. And this dude's crossing the street who's in a coat because it's Chicago and some kind of baggy jeans and a backpack, no ball cap. Cops come around the corner, get out of the car, yelling at him, pin him down to the ground, strip off his coat, search him, find nothing, and they just drive off. And he just has to dust off all his stuff, put all his clothes back on, put his his coat back on, put his backpack on, and keep going to the bus. And it dawned on me right in that moment, there is one difference between the way that dude and I look.
Right. It's your skin color.
It's our skin color.
Yeah.
That's all. And those experiences helped me a little bit with the understanding that, there is the way, just simple, like the way that I am perceived and treated because of my skin color has changed my entire experience of life. What if I had grown up here with this skin color, which I didn't have a choice in this. What if I had, and I'd had all these experiences, would I view the world and things and politics and cops and hope and everything differently?
Yeah.
I think I would.
Yeah.
I know I would.
Well, I think in the process, I've been asking myself two questions in this as a pastor, and I'm wrestling with I don't even know. Number one is, what the heck does reconciliation look like within the context of the church? Because I know there are lots of views on what reconciliation looks like. And number two, the church seems to be modeling exactly what's going on in society, and that, and people of color, and that would be all of us, I guess, but African-American community and the Hispanic community, they segregate just like the white community does.
Sure.
And so,
which is because you understand each other.
Because you understand each other.
It's there's segregation. There's layers to it.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
But what we have now is, so in my church, which is a church of about 100 adults, it is probably 80% white.
Yep.
Right.
I think we're in that range.
And so if you're African American, which is about 3 people, you obviously feel like you stick out.
Yep.
If you're Hispanic, which is like 3 or 4 people, you feel like you stick out. And because, now it's a little bit more different at the Village in that the white people in our community come from different countries. So there's a little less, there's a little bit more ethnic diversity, but it's still very white.
Yeah. And then it's not just white looking, it's white feeling. And so both of our churches, I know, it's not just you walk in and look around and go, oh, are there people of my skin color? But is the way that I express myself going to be, will anyone here be expressing themselves that way? Can I express myself that way and be comfortable? Am I going to have to take on a whole another like cultural identity? So, the Village, like, beautiful. You guys, I love your church, and I think you're needed here. But if I'm coming from the black church and I walk into the Village, like,
different. Well, see,
super different.
Here's the other problem that's happening is that if you're younger, you are starting to merge your cultural identity.
Sure.
So, for instance, one of the guys who's African American guy in our community, like, what he said when he came to our church is, "I'm finally home."
Yeah.
He's grown up in in that context.
And I'm not saying that context has fit all.
No, I'm not. But what happens is, even when we as white people begin to discuss this, we begin to say, well, there are these people, and this is how they interact, and it's their cultural thing. And all of a sudden, we're constantly in trouble. No, for real. Like that's a thing because, well, we're assuming upon all sorts of. Interestingly, the dude who came up in my blog and he was mentioned in my sermon, who I met recently, was also from South Chicago. Well, one thing I learned about him was he's a guy from South Chicago that didn't fit like the paradigm there, and so he wasn't. He was a very creative, musical, and not like church choir musical necessarily. Like he had his own style and way of thinking, and so he probably. I mean, I think there's a reason he hasn't like clicked and locked into that community. So we can't, just because somebody has this color of skin, obviously it's silly to then layer upon them a whole bunch of assumptions. Right.
Yeah.
So here's what I was curious about in this conversation was, I think God's called me in my place to be as one, to listen as well as I can, to actually seek out people's stories, which I have done and I'm trying to do, and two, to try as hard as I can when I walk into a meeting or into a room that's diverse to actually step back, not use what I have to allow other voices to be first. That doesn't mean my voice can't be spoken, but my voice needs to be third, fourth, fifth, not first. And I think that's been a real hard thing at times, and also just not because I want to speak, but trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
Because, you're having to try to facilitate that by stepping back and being silent and encouraging other people to speak and to lead and to have voice in shaping things, no matter where you go.
Now, what if, though, because in the Village, from everything I can gather, it is very shaped by you. Even in you deciding to step back, I mean, you decide to step back.
Sure.
And like in like the feeling, this is, you have been called by God, I would say, to plant this church.
Sure.
And to set the tone and to show what it's. So when you step back and say, hey, I want other people to lead, interestingly, you are leading it.
Oh, of course.
Right.
But I'm creating I'm trying to create, with whatever power I do have, a place that is that gives people voice and dignity.
Yeah.
And changes the culture to the point where they'll get enough of the courage and the sense of belonging to take over, to move out on their own, to come up with creative ideas that aren't linked to me or to the elders or to, So
I'm going to, real quick, I want to try to pull in this missionary lady.
Yeah.
Real quick, because...
Well, it's good because we have part 2s in this missionary lady.
Yeah, but I'm wondering about something here. So she went to Uganda to... I mean, when you think about Jesus and the call to wash people's feet and stuff like that, she's going to serve malnutrition, malnourished kids.
Yes.
Now she blogs about it and obviously got raised support and all the things that, I guess to do that she probably had to do, but it also put her as kind of a face to the whole thing. But I'll bet you if you really drilled down a few years back before all this blew up, she would have said, I'm here to just take a servant role to help the health and well-being of folks so that they can raise up and lead their community and have health and have a voice and X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
But she decided how she would serve them.
Right.
And I don't know her, obviously. None of us who are talking about her really know the motives. Some people do, but most of us don't know the motives behind her masquerading as having more medical experience than she did. But I would assume she thought, I just got to get this done. And she felt this calling from God, but it seems like she was like, I'm serving and helping save people's lives. And now an attorney in Uganda is saying on behalf of some families, the way you decided to save our lives, we wanted you to do it right, not the way that you did.
Right.
And the what people are saying is this white savior complex of like, they need me, I'll come in there and I'll elevate them, and I will be the one that helps them reach their potential and have their voice or do their thing.
Yeah.
And people are saying that shouldn't be. Now, I'm not sure how to feel about that.
I think I'm just gonna.
Am I off the mic?
Well, it's not you're off the mic, but your P's are hitting the top
okay.
of the.
I'm peeing on the top of
You
the
are.
mic. So I.
Sorry, I didn't mean
bad
to cut you off.
Bad joke.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to. Like, I see times when I'm like, with you, I'm saying, I think God did call you to plant this church.
Sure.
And so what if somebody came along and went, I don't think Eric, handing me control, he's doing it his way. He's giving me a voice in the thing he made, and it's not good. And I would kind of push back on that a little bit. But at the same time, it is, I think, wrong to go in and assume something upon people and to be disingenuous, like potentially she was. And I guess I'm just, where does the whiteness factor in to that in your mind? The fact that she was white and that you are white and that I am white.
I think the white part of it is that she got to do a lot of things that she shouldn't have been allowed to do because she was white.
Yeah.
And she was, from what I can see here, she's mentally ill, but people overlook that. I mean, she was trying to take patients from a very legitimate hospital into her own. Like, she was recruiting them out of.
The way I read it in the NPR article was that patients were still malnourished, and her stated mission was to come alongside the medical facilities in Uganda by adding nutritional help, but then she began to do more than that. Yeah.
Right. So something was going on with her that there wasn't a lot of oversight, it didn't seem.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd chalk that up to mentally ill, because, think about it. If you or I had been sent out at a young age and we went on a short-term mission trip and we got excited and we went and we got caught up in all this and...
Yeah, but this seems like in her story there's an element of narcissism to her.
But I'm just saying there's probably an element of narcissism in a lot of people of all colors. But what I'm saying is I could see anybody like given that kind of money and leeway and leading this organization like getting off the rails.
Sure, I guess. I don't know. I don't think so.
No, I mean, I guess I could have seen the temptation for a lot of people I know to get in there and think that they're helping and maybe do some things that an expert should. I mean, there are things that Christians do.
Well, this is why I'm involved or connected at some level in some way to two different denominations, and this is why I like denominations at some level, because there's oversight.
I agree with you on this.
People going, hey, this isn't right. You can't be doing this. This is not what we're doing.
I think that's a layer of this for sure.
But this is very much American. Like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to make this happen. And
I will do this. It's freedom. It's religious freedom.
Right. When I say mentally ill, I'm not saying diagnosis. Like, she's narcissistic. I read some of the stuff. I remember watching the show. I think there's an element of her thinking she can save people. Maybe it's partly out of her culture. But
did you think you could save people when you started the village, though? Somehow healing the city one city at one person at a time?
One city at a time. We moved up.
Healing the city one city at a time.
I didn't want to be a pastor. I did not want to plant a church. I was told that I was, and I had to. So no, I didn't think I could. Once I started the mission, my pitch was, yes, things are falling apart, and we need to do something about it. But yeah, of course, and especially when you're different, there's a level of arrogance that you can build, which comes with anything, right? But yeah, okay. So if she's successful. But I don't know. There are 106 people responsible for. She may be responsible for
105.
105. Okay.
So there were, but
probably 106. We just don't know about that one.
Yeah. one of the arguments, of course, is, yeah, but there were way more than that came through, and these people would have died anyway. And I'm not saying that justifies this at all. I'm not saying that.
You just like both sides of the story.
I do.
Always present.
I do. But I mean, that's one thing that people, she goes into a place where a lot of people are dying and some of them still die, and that's to be expected. And I don't think that makes masquerading as an MD okay.
No.
See, and I don't know that she masqueraded as an MD. She did what an MD should do and didn't disclose that to her supporters.
Right.
And such.
So there's a lot of deception going on here. So the capacity to
Right.
be that deceptive and keep those deceptions going,
Right.
for whatever, your ego, for the fact that you think you're doing something good, has a level of narcissism, which I would say has a level of some mental illness.
I mean, don't you think like the lion's share of leaders, and I'm not just talking about Christianity now, but people who start things and entrepreneurs and people that go do the impossible, that like this level of narcissism is just present and almost like they can't go and do these things without it. And some of them we praise and go, wow, look, they invented the light bulb and they did X, Y, and Z. And, and then others, when they mess up, we go, oh, look, they're narcissistic. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, I think sure there's a lot. I mean, yes. But
is that, I don't think that like
compulsive liars.
I don't think that's the whiteness part of
masquerade. Oh, of course. But no, but it comes with power. You tend
the more power you have, the further you can go with your narcissism.
And we can't avoid it.
Sure. Okay.
Whiteness is power.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point in time. I agree
with that.
Since the Renaissance, since really Martin Luther and the Reformation, there has been, white has been power. Like, white fights the big wars, white takes the slaves, white right. controls the narrative.
Was there a time in history when that wasn't the case?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's because we weren't traveling all over the place. So then those kinds of dominant things happened within smaller cultural sects. Right. So the Zulus were taking slaves all the time, and they were the ones giving slaves to the white plantation, to the Dutch and to the Spanish,
And so power can come through. It can come through whiteness, absolutely. It could probably come through technology, force.
It's just that we have to deal with 500 years.
But here we are, and and whiteness is a driving factor. Yeah.
Yeah, and so so the thing that I don't like about this whole article about this woman is it's just it went from a Christian perspective. It's just typical. We do not usually post all the horrible things the Buddhist leader does.
No.
All the horrible things. Part of it is there are millions and millions of great stories of what followers of Jesus are doing in this world. And we're holding back the tide of evil in so many ways. And you look at every good movement and you will find Christians at the base of it. Catholic, Episcopal, non-denominational, people who follow Jesus, who love Jesus.
I could hear somebody arguing at that and going, every good movement, Eric, but I would push.
I'll go toe to toe with you. Give me a good movement that had nothing to do with Jesus, and I will.
Well, it'll depend on your definition of good. I'm just saying, like, there are movements that have been successful that some people would say are good that didn't have a Christian behind them. That would be my pushback. But I also agree with you that so Bob, my buddy who I've said needs to come on this podcast, he responded to me about one of our other, podcast, or the Josh Harris stuff. And
Except that we haven't posted Josh Harris yet.
Maybe he and I talked about it outside of that or something. But he was saying, oh no, he saw that Josh Harris had left Christianity and he contacted me. And I was kind of responding back to him and I said, why is it? And I said, I'm the same way. When a Christian leader falls, it's so interesting. Like, my buddy Bob is interested. I'm interested. We're talking about it on here.
Right.
And then the thousands of them that don't get any space. And why aren't we going after every, like you said, Buddhist and Hindu and secularist who fails and falls? What is it about the failure of Christians that's interesting culturally to everybody and especially to us Christians? Why do we love it? Why are we so interested in it?
Well, because Christians keep telling everybody what to do.
Sure.
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's part of it. We're like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do it. Here's the way you should do it. Here's the formula.
and so then when we aren't,
then when we're not that way, they're like, ooh, what's going on there?
but aren't there other groups of people telling people what to do? And
Yeah, but everybody knows at this point in time in history, all movements, everything that we think comes from Christianity some way. So if Christians fall, or Christians do something stupid, or someone leaves the faith, it's part of the fabric of society maybe changing.
wait, all movements come from Christianity?
Oh yeah, I would say everything that we think and believe and are arguing for right now
I could see an argument for that. I could see an argument against that too. I don't know. I'm just
give me an argument.
I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Do it. Give me an argument. I don't know if there is an argument against it.
Okay.
That's actually intellectually worth listening to.
So okay.
Because they're usually
so you would say there's no. I mean, I'm trying to I'm trying to think of some movements.
Women's rights.
Okay.
The understanding of rights.
I'm gonna agree with you on that.
Comes from Christianity. Let's talk about pro-life. That comes from Christianity.
Well, yeah, sure.
Let's talk about the government that we have. Comes from theism and Christianity. What I mean.
So, but it's the all movement statement. Like, there's no movement.
The way European and American society operates. It operates out of the Reformation.
You're only talking about white people.
Renaissance.
What about movements that come from Africa and South America and Asia?
Well,
are any of those coming from Buddhism? Are any of those coming from anything else?
Right, but I'm not talking. Okay, when you say all movements, I'm talking about in the context of where this person is arguing. Why are we so interested in Christianity, and why are we so interested in?
Okay. Well, all movements sounds like
and I
all
would say
movements to me.
From South Africa or from Africa and from
well,
South
the Europeans
America.
went in and
Yes, and right now
colonialized
Christianity
it.
is exploding.
Right.
And so eventually the movements of goodness will be coming out of there too, and are already.
So
But I'm just trying to say that the way we understand who we are and what's wrong with things comes from Christian faith. There's just no way around that.
So what do we do with the dark side of it, though?
It's really dark.
So where does that come from? It's one thing to say, hey, look, people, all movements come from Christian faith, but then
no Christian principles anyway.
or Christian principles, and then some people are saying, well, it's really screwed up.
Yeah, it's really
the
screwed
movements.
Up. Yeah, because people are screwed up. Yeah.
So where's the explanation? Since it's all coming from the Christian faith, then why in the world would I be interested in the Christian faith when all these movements coming from it are screwed up?
Oh, well, here's the thing. All the good movements are.
Okay.
The things that you value deeply come from principles from Christianity. The very fact that you're asking that question is something that comes from Christianity. What I'm trying to say is you can't escape it. Every question you ask, every pushback you push is something from the principles that were developed in you from long ago and are still, even in this culture, being pushed into you. Human rights.
I want to kill.
Yeah, but that's not a good movement. We don't have where is that movement?
People are doing it, but it's not an embraced movement.
The things we believe about society, how we understand ourselves as people. Okay, fine. Throw out the movements. Just all of life, the way we operate, the way we think about things, the way we think about order and safety and
of course, you and I are coming from a place of believing that that God is the creator behind things, and so good movements would all be traceable back to his good and perfect law and character. And so then it would be, and we believe that Christianity is, has amazing continuity with that while bringing in the concepts of grace and mercy in Christ, and deepening those. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we would see that. I'm just saying, if you saw everything from a different angle, that'd be a very hard pill to swallow. If you saw everything as a result of random chance, that'd be a hard pill to swallow. And it should be a hard pill to swallow. I'm just saying it is.
But it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about history, you know that the brutality of life begins to change in 30 years.
Oh no, I know. I'm not. I don't totally disagree. I'm pushing back for the sake of
Sure,
like the
But
fact that you and
I don't care if God is I don't care if somebody doesn't believe God is real.
yeah.
So what? You can't argue with history. You just can't.
Yeah.
You can say, "Oh yeah, well the Christians did this and Christians did that." That's fine. The only way we understand human dignity comes from Jesus. It's primarily from Jesus. Human dignity, the image bearing kind of thing, was only a Jewish idea prior to that. You can't find it in other cultures, not to the extent of
Well, and you could
Judaism.
still make the argument with those ancient cultures that even though, even if you did find it in them, that they still were impacted by the original,
Sure.
by the creation narrative and whatever pieces of dignity had been passed down from that, and you could make that
Right.
argument. That I would assume that in every culture there was deep brokenness, and then there were some good things, but I would say that those good things, in the words of James K. A. Smith, would be borrowed capital
Yeah.
from the God who spoke at creation, and later on from the law of God, and then later on
Sure.
from the revelation of Christ.
Yes. I agree. I just think none of them were powerful enough to make a movement to
Agreed.
change a way people think.
Right.
Sure. Did people do crazy things, like try to force those things on people? Yes. Has it been messy over the last 500 years? Yes. But I'd
before,
much rather live now
I just punched the microphone.
just punched
so
it.
mad at you, Eric.
than 2,000 years ago for a lot of reasons.
Oh, yeah, and
but
that's
the value of human life was nothing.
Speaking of our old Jordan Peterson podcast, which somebody just told me they listened to our podcast for the first time, scrolled down to Jordan Peterson and tried it first. Interesting how that works. But one of the
Not one of our better podcasts, I didn't think. But,
probably not.
but it's listened to a lot.
It is, which the whole clickbait thing. But one of his things is look, you can complain a lot about our modern society, but it is what we've got going on here, despite all the brokenness, is still leaps and bounds, better. Do you want to go? Do you want to go live somewhere else? It's, and some people would say yes, and I get that. But his point was there have been a lot of good benefits despite the inherent flaws. There have been a lot of good benefits that we very easily take for granted.
Yes.
Yeah. The fact that we all have a voice to chip in and disagree and protest, and we aren't getting shot down in the streets very much.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm not saying you have to convert to the faith because, you need to acknowledge that the understanding of who people are and the dignity of life, however you understand it, comes from a Judeo-Christian ethic that was developed 2,000 years ago.
So now to bring this back to the whiteness thing,
Sure.
someone could say
Sorry about that, Tyrant.
a lot. No, this is good. A lot of those movements that went and failed were driven by white people, and what I hear implicitly in what you're saying is that it was for the good.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, and I think this is where I have a big tension. Is some of that white power drove those movements.
Oh, yeah.
Are we ready to say that was good, or was that the evil part, and how do we go back and reconcile that, and how do we move forward?
Well, I think two things, and this is the first answer people are not going to like, and they'll get mad at me, but it's fine. What we meant for evil, which it was evil,
Yeah.
I think, because what happened in American society over the last 75 years when it comes to Christians is that we married with power.
Yep.
And then we just, and we went back to not the Crusades, we went back to the colonization, and we just started colonizing.
Mm-hmm.
But God meant for good. There are ways that God has used that, but that's not the reason to do it.
That doesn't make it okay all.
He's just, He has redeemed that process in many ways, but many people have suffered under it. And I think as Christians, in America, we need to pull in a little bit and begin to think about what it means to walk with Jesus in a way that's humble, and a way that is not exercising of our power, and is willing to sacrifice much of what we have for others who are weaker, and not demand that they even be accountable for how they use our power, what we give away to them, our money,
Right.
our
This brings up an interesting thing that happened recently where a historically black college asked one of the large denominations, the Southern Baptists, to give them a lot of money because as a reparation. And this gets into the whole, what do we do? And this is confusing stuff, I think, is they said, what they were saying, and this denomination said, but you teach things that theologically we don't agree with, and so we can't fund you. And then they came back and said, you must fund us because of what you did. And so that would be giving away money, right, without control.
Yeah. Wow.
That's sticky stuff.
Is it?
I mean, would you would you do it?
Well, unfortunately, it certainly depends on if you're saying you guys teach a theology, maybe that it's more liberation oriented, or if you're going and choosing to go against the doctrines, doctrines of the church, and
I think that's what
a more heretical
I think that's
on Jesus.
I think that's where I think that's what's
that would
going
make
on.
it harder.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I believe that is the case. It's not just like subtleties; it's major differences. Yeah,
Right. I don't know. Well, and that's the thing. I do think systems reparations can't be given to individuals, but the system needs reparations.
Right.
I don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, I was gonna say because this isn't individual people asking for the reparation. This is a system
Yeah.
asking for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to do some uncomfortable things. I think it doesn't mean you give away all your principles. But what's also I haven't read it or looked at why they're asking, but I'm sure it's not more than you've done us wrong and so we need money. There's a list of things that historically the Southern Baptist as an organization has done to this particular college that they're saying, hey, we need to be.
I assume there's a list.
There's got to be a list. And it'd be interesting to know what those are, right? Because at some level, maybe because of how they were treated, they are in the place that they are now. Like,
yeah, maybe.
Who knows? I don't know. Whatever. You're right, though. I mean, I think gosh, that's hard.
Yeah. Well, on that note of clarity.
But no, think about it this way. But if somebody, let's get away from race. If somebody, just any old person who's needy, needs some money, they need to borrow your car, or they need a car, and they live a lifestyle that's not bad, but not one you agree with.
But the difference here is,
but need your car, or they need their mortgage payment paid.
But the difference here is that this would be the scenario. A person, let's say a close family member of yours, who you mistreated.
Mm-hmm. Right, I guess it better. Okay, so
and
close family member we mistreated,
and you denied them basic human rights, and so on and so forth.
Wouldn't invite them to Thanksgiving, talk bad about them.
And then they are practicing things that you don't agree with. Now, the question is, did you cause that because of how you treated them? And you don't know.
They're practicing which?
Sure.
But that's not why I mistreated them. This is just where they're at now.
Right. And they come and
because I'm a jerk.
And in the case of the college, they're not saying pay my mortgage. They're saying pay me to train more witches.
Right.
That's complicated.
Well, maybe it's better. What they're saying is
that's actually not. I don't like that scenario because witch versus a different version of theology is I don't like that.
Well, but train me. But here's the thing. Let's just even forget that. Like and the person's asking you to cover their mortgage because they've hit hard times, and they've given a lot of their money to this other group that you don't agree with.
Yeah, but this is a school saying fund the education that we
Right.
provide. So it is more specific. It's not pay for housing for some folks. It's fund the educating. It's
Right. Well,
this is hard stuff.
Well, and I agree. And I think, I mean,
And I think it's probably best worked out face to face, person to person.
Sure.
Messy.
Messy.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it.
It is really
in
messy.
theory. It'd be very different for, people who had really been on the journey to be in the room to talk about the nuances of all this and to really listen to each other back and forth.
But I think at some level, can we really hold the money back? Because just because you've changed and are doing things that I don't agree with, if I've done something to you, I have to pay for what I did. This is a past thing. Just because it might help something now that I disagree with, if I can agree that I made choices to hurt you, there should be reparations for just the pain. That money is not mine anymore. If you want to use it for education, that's your choice. I have to pay for what we did, or the institution. So the institution, that's sort of the let go of the control, is we're not giving you money so that you can educate. You may use that money that way, that's fine, but we're giving you money to pay for what we did.
So ex-members of the village who don't like what happened here could come and ask for money.
Hey, if it were that kind of thing, yes.
What if in their perception it was?
Well, but here's the thing.
And who decides? You with the power? It's that kind of thing? Who decides?
Well, I think it's pretty, when it becomes overarchingly obvious. Like, are these obvious claims, or are these just, hey, we're...
In whose mind? The ones with power, the leaders of this church?
No, and the actual people who are making the claim. Or is it... There's a difference between being somebody who's trying to just grab money out of you because you have money, and a person who has legitimate concerns.
And who decides... Do they decide that they're legitimate or not? Or who decides that? I'm saying this is the stickiness of it.
But I think some of it is obvious. We're talking about an institution. If you can document how things happened, right? These are not like, yesterday you didn't look at me and that's going to cost you $5.
Right.
There's some, we could say it's sticky, but...
I think it's sticky.
Here's the thing. You just set a level, like an agreed on level of there's things that are obviously true and not true.
Somebody comes here and they say the things that you taught here at the village destroyed my marriage. Like the way that you told us to do X, Y, and Z, and we tried those and it destroyed everything. And I lost my family and my kids and so it cost me this much and all these fees plus all the damages that I felt within my soul, and give me $1 million.
Yeah, and I'd say, well, I don't have $1 million, so that's going to be a problem.
Well, they say that you can pay it off in chunks. $500 a month.
$500 a month. Sure. I don't know why
you
not.
Would do that. No. Really? Just sure.
There you go. Anybody who has a problem with my teaching.
Because holy cow, they'll come out of the woodwork.
All right, well, that's a great time. But let's make it a little bit more like what is probably going on. You not only taught me things that were damaging, but you personally had an agenda to destroy me, and here is the steps you took to do that.
And that is a nuance, the purposefulness, but then... It still is who decides it was purposeful.
Well,
right?
Okay, so over and over again, African Americans from this college make proposals on the floor that are denied every single time. At some point, you say that's a pattern.
Yeah. No, I know. I agree.
So those things we're talking about. It's not.
And I'm not arguing against. I am not. I just want to be clear. Not arguing to say anything about like, hey, these wrongs weren't done. I'm just saying the way to move forward is it's
well, and that's
hard.
the thing.
So it's hard. It's confusing.
And I think people from the other angle would be saying it's not up to us. We had the power. At some level, we have to be trampled on like others were, and taken advantage of and used. And it's not our right to say, is this the best use of our money any longer?
I mean,
wow, that makes us very uncomfortable and terrified.
What I'm pushing back on is like theoretically, okay, but like I'm just going, Art, like if you were really pressed on this and you were in this situation, would you do it? And I'm asking that question of myself.
Sure.
You know, like it's one thing to say when we're talking about the Southern Baptists, who we consider this big behemoth denomination that we don't really understand, and they have coffers, and we can look at them and go, you should do it.
Well, I don't know if they can pour out that kind of money. I don't know.
I have no clue.
I don't know the details. I don't even know I'm going to go research this now because I've never even heard this.
Yeah, they're the biggest denomination in the country. I mean, which also makes them a target.
Sure.
Like, so they have to wrestle with that. Like,
sure.
Yep.
And that means that as an institution, they have to set up a system to handle those things and to honor those voices and to not write them off because they disagree with them.
And we don't know in which ways they are honoring and what lies behind them saying no when they've said no and yes when they've said yes.
Yeah.
And, yep. Hey.
Well, hopefully we poked people well enough.
Bears were poked.
Good.
Again, with our premise, in case anybody doesn't know, we didn't plan this. This is pastors talking over some coffee, and we're a mess, and we're trying to learn how to follow Jesus. So Thanks for sitting with us for breakfast.
Thank you.
And we will follow up on this with a little more of the missions medical piece with Dr. James.
Probably much more interesting than this.
I don't know.